Hello, I'm Alice Hutchinson, the owner of Birds Books, an independent bookstore in Bethel, Connecticut, and I am honored to be the host of Write America. The aim of this series is to help set the country back on a correct, productive course of freedom, justice, equality, and plain human kindness. Write America is a literary series created by author Roger Rosenblatt, featuring award winning, nationally renowned authors and new and emerging writers in readings and conversations each week about how books and art might bridge the deep divisions in our nation. Write America celebrates the quiet power of art in our lives, the unifying power of the highest uses of language. In novels, stories, essays, and poems, we recognize one another as parts of the human family, one family. Roger Rosenblatt, the creator of Write America, puts it this way: writing makes justice desirable, evil intelligible, grief endurable, and love possible. So welcome, and please join us every Monday evening at this time as many of the most beloved and distinguished writers in the country read from their works and talk to each other and with you in an effort to bring us together. If you missed last week's episode with Ursula Heggie and Vijay Seshadri, or any of the previous episodes of Write America, you can go to Birds Books Crowdcast channel and watch the recordings at any time. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you missed something, you can go back and rewatch. Tonight, Birds Books hosts a reading by and conversation with Tyehimba Jess, Molly Gaudry, and Marie Howe. I will return at the end after the readings and discussion to bring your questions and comments to the authors. For those of you unfamiliar with Crowdcast, many of you have already discovered the chat to the right of the screen. Please feel free to comment throughout the evening. If you have a question, however, I'd ask you to look to the bottom of your screen, and there's an Ask a Question tab, and that's where I will go to look for any questions you might have for the authors. Third, the green link to this episode on Birds Books' website is where you can purchase the author's books while supporting the bookstore and Write America, and that's at the bottom of your screen as well. Now, a little about our first speaker. Tyehimba Jess is the author of 2 books of poetry, Leadbelly and Olio. Olio won the 2017 Pulitzer Prize, the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, the Midland Society Authors Award in Poetry, and received an outstanding contribution to publishing citation from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. It was also nominated for the National Book Critics Circle Award, the Penn Gene Stein Book Award, and the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. Leadbelly was the winner of the 2004 National Poetry Series. Jess's fiction and poetry have appeared in many journals and anthology. Jess, a Cave Canem and NYU alumni, received the 2004 Literature Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and was a 2004-2005 Winter Fellow at the Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center. He is a veteran of the 2000 and 2001 Green Mill Poetry Slam Team and won a 2000-2001 Illinois Arts Council Fellowship in Poetry, the 2001 Chicago Sun-Times Poetry Award, and a 2006 Whiting Fellowship. He presented his poetry at the 2011 TEDx Nashville Conference and won a 2016 Lannan Literary Award in Poetry. He received a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2018. Jess is a professor of English at College of Staten Island. Please welcome to the screen, Tyehimba Jess. Let me snag you.
Hey.
Hey.
Right, Alice. It's good to be here, folks. Really a pleasure to read with these fantastic poets tonight, Marie and Molly. So glad to be here. I think I'd like to start with a poem from Olio. And Alice, if you could bring that up on the screen.
It's not coming up on the screen because we have too many people up. So
okay, well then
sorry.
Let's roll with. Then we'll do something else. That's cool. I think then I'll start with a poem from this book, Leadbelly, which is the life and times of Hoodie Ledbetter, who was a 12-string guitarist who was born in Texas, and he was called the king of the 12-string guitar. So here's a poem. It's the beginning poem of the book, the initial poem, Leadbelly's Lessons. Mr. Haney owned Shreveport's General Store, where $1 a week bought my 12-year-old frames lift and lunge of barrel and crate across a sawdust floor. Still, he wanted more. See, the guitar refused to get naked with Haney. He would fumble up the seams of its hidden croon, hook, clasp, and bodice of each tune, mangled down to his stunted strum. So he quit. He'd hoist bourbon and order me to hoist song. The velvet locomotive of marrow deep hum I tote up from the swollen center of guitar. Its catch and slide caught between palms and cradle crossed Louisiana starlight. His bottle and scowl grew louder with each reel and jump that I played, while getting paid to show the way of undressing music from its wooden clothes. But it was like coaxing stone to bathe in sky. He never let his flesh wallow in the blue floating round his earth, so he buried himself deeper in his own dirt. He'd think on the hurt a white man can do without second thought. He'd slur, "Nigga, someday I'm gonna kill you," and stagger home. It was there, alone, in the dark darkness of me, that I first learned the ways of pure white envy. And thank you, Mr. Haney, for teaching me. So that's the first poem in the book. And here's another one. This is a poem from the perspective of the woman. Well, this is a poem. He went to prison twice. Once for murder and murdering somebody over a woman, and the second time for uh, almost killing somebody over a song. So here we go. This is called Freedom. Freedom is what you can buy with a song. After the song has been soldered into your lungs, after the song has beaten its way inside your dreams, after the song has snuck its way into your bed, after the song has festered and blossomed and festered again, after the song has stolen your fingertips and robbed your voice blind. After all this, you try to sell the song that can never be sold. You end up with your hand out, waiting for the words that spell freedom. Freedom is every dirt road ground in the whiskey still of my voice. My back pocket buck knife sharpening silence, coiled up close to copperhead, dime, and dollar bill, the price of a pint and the slow violence of a Victrola spitting Bessie's blues. Freedom is my baby's tit in my palm, a song in the sweet back sling of her legs, the snake oil slide of dreadnought guitar standing hard in darkened dayroom corners. Freedom lurches in and out of my life, heavy as the swollen secret of a noose. So from this book, Olio, this is Leadbelly was about Leadbelly, who lived 1885 to 1949. And I guess we got time for maybe one and a half or two from Olio. Olio is about Black musicians and artists that lived before the era of recording. There were a lot of fascinating people that came up in that research. So this one is I think I'll do two on a guy named Blind Boone. Blind Boone was an interesting fella. He was born 1865, and at the age of 6 months, his eyes, well, at the age of 6 months, he caught encephalitis. And the only cure that they had for encephalitis at the time was no penicillin, no antibiotics. Encephalitis, your brain is going to swell until you die. And the doctor took this 6-year-old infant's eyes out of his skull in order to relieve the pressure on the brain. So this is later on he became an amazing piano player who had a pretty much a memory for sound. Blind Boone's blessings. Bless the fever in that night, in the 6th month of my life. Bless the fever for it gave me sight. It swole my brain to fit God's gift. It brought the hand that would lift each eye from my infant skull. Bless the sweat, my baby ball. Bless the horse that hauled the surgeon through dusk's dark, half drunk and swearing into mine. Bless the flame. It sterilized the metal of the spoon. Bless the path between lid and bone, slipped and slid by the instrument of my deliverance from sight. Bless the handling of the knife. Bless that night that gave me night, wrapped around my bloody face, whispered how I could be grace notes, arpeggios, a piano roll of sound, copying each note from everything around me. You see, I'm sure at first there was the hurt and the scalding pain, but then again, bless an infant's too short memory. All I know is what lies beyond light. I've learned this is what's right for this one right here. So yes, bless the fever, then listen close. Spare an ear to this piano and shut your eyes closed. And I think this next one will be my very last one. This one is entitled it's an interesting story with Blind Boone. At a certain age, the town that he lived in realized that he had great musical talent, so they put their money together to send him to a school for piano in St. Louis. This, you got to remember, this is in the roughly 1880s, 1870s, really. And St. Louis was the edge of the Wild West. And essentially, what happened is he ended up. This is a blind boy who ran away from the school because they decided they weren't going to teach him how to play piano. So Blind Boone's escape. Even a blind man might run away from folks that won't see things his way. That's what I told myself when I packed my bags and bailed out of the St. Louis School for the Blind. My whole town had pitched in for tuition, dime by dime, because we've been told they teach me more piano. They did for a time. And I'd fallen hard in love with its ivory lessons. But then, listen, the new schoolmaster came to say that piano was to stay clear of black hands in our unlearned ways. I was banned from the music room and given straw to manufacture brooms with my other colored mates. But who was this fool to decide my fate? I fumbled my way out the school's back gate. I've been swept out by their broom philosophy, straight into the streets of sweet St. Louis. Her alleys and gangways awaited my touch. I struck out toward the sticky sounds of barrel house drama, toward the pimps and johns and cat house groan that seemed to run on syncopated piano and moan. I could smell the sin and taste the grown-up rum of laughter spilling under a setting sun. Damn, I was dumb. Could have been killed, but still, here I am. And I will remember that night under a sky that I knew must be stuffed with a million tunes. I could almost hear from my grassy bed. I'll never forget. I leaned in to wear it like a bowler tipped hard across my head. Thank you.
No, thank you. See you on the other side. Our second speaker is Molly Gaudry. Molly is the founder of Lit Pub and the author of the verse novel We Take Me Apart, which was a finalist for the Asian American Literary Award and shortlisted for the PEN Osterwheel Its sequel, Desire, A Haunting, is also now available. Molly holds a master's degree in fiction and poetry from the University of Cincinnati and George Mason University, respectively, and a PhD in experimental prose from the University of Utah. An assistant professor of creative writing and literature at Stony Brook University, she teaches in the BFA and MFA programs, travels between the Stony Brook, Southampton, and Manhattan campuses. Summers, she teaches at the Yale Writers Workshop. Please welcome to the screen, Molly Gaudry. Let me snag you here, Molly. There you go.
Thank you so much. Tyehimba, that was amazing. I've heard you read before. It's always a pleasure. Tonight, I thought that I would read from my third book, manuscript. It's in manuscript form right now. I just sent it into my publisher. And I'm actually going to put the link to what I'm going to read in the chat so you can follow along if you want to. I personally prefer to follow along. So this is actually last time I was here for Write America, I read the preface, and now I'm just going to pick up right where I left off. This is just the very beginning of chapter 1 of Fit Into Me. In February 2014, after being single for years, I began seeing a man who was divorced, nearing 40, and feeling his own clock ticking. When I read online that the chances of everyone's first marriage working out aren't great, but that divorced men tend to stick with their second wives until the end, I got over the fact of his divorce pretty fast. He had moved to Salt Lake City for a job, and it paid well enough, he told me, to support a family. A few months later, I would turn him into the Portuguese lover, but the Portuguese lover is a fiction. Everything about the Portuguese lover is a fiction. Everything is a story. You are a story. I'm a story. After I learned that he always carried a Sharpie so he could draw a dick and balls on something, on anything in every public building he went into, I opted out and never saw him again. Sometime later, I was invited to dinner by the man I would end up dating for the next 16 months. This man would become the young lover. Not everything about the young lover is a fiction, least of all, the way her body existed only where he touched her. Who said this? That the only way to know when you're done with a book is to have two projects going simultaneously. And then one day, when you realize you've been putting all your energy into the new project, that's when you'll know you're done with the old one. I was getting closer to finishing Desire, and so I decided to move on. I put away that draft to see if it could survive time and distance, and I began preparing a new book. I already had the title, Fit Into Me. As I had done for my first two books, I developed a word bank to help me start generating new pages. I transcribed all the nouns and verbs from Anne Carson's translation of Sappho's poems. I printed them, cut them up like refrigerator poetry magnets, put them in a giant Ziploc bag and shook, sifted, swirled, mixing and separating as best I could. Then I pulled them out one at a time to transcribe lists of 10 into a notebook. The first word I pulled was dripping. In my notes, I granted myself permission. Go ahead with these words. Let them inspire. See what comes. Word list number 1. Dripping, younger, lattice, great, lightly, bee, purple, come, swear, hair. Preface. Fit Into Me. I write this novel an offering to the tea house woman, that complicated figure who appears first as bride-to-be in We Take Me Apart, and then years later as widow in Desire a Haunting, which I've only just completed. This is a bad period for me. It's the end of a book, and there's a kind of loneliness, as if that closed book were going on still somewhere else, inside me, like an open eye. Salt Lake City, Utah, February 2014. And so the first word of the tea house woman's story is dripping, which could refer to anything. The faulty kitchen faucet, the basement ceiling of the tea house after the flood, stems of wildflower bouquets pulled putrid from tall white pitchers, her own wet cunt. In fact, dripping refers to Sappho. The word appears twice in her body of work, first in fragment 37, in My Dripping Pain, and again in fragment 119, Cloth Dripping. Regarding fragment 37, Anne Carson tells us the text is cited as Sappho's in the following discussion of words for pain, and the Aeolic writers call pain a dripping as if a pain wounds, because it drips and flows. Translated differently by Mary Barnard, the fragment appears as follows: pain penetrates me drop by drop. In her thesis, the Mary Barnard translation of Sappho, Angela Christie speculates that Sappho was thinking of dripping stalagmites. Barnard corrects her. I'm sure that she did not have stalagmites in mind, she writes, nor did I. I thought of a faucet dripping in the next room, say. Then of a heartbeat, then of the pulse, then of throbbing pain. The comparison is not with a hard stone pointed object, but with rhythmic, liquid movement inside the body. The tea house woman surprises herself by taking a new lover. He is younger than her Portuguese lover, and this morning she lies awake in bed waiting for him to stir. The rising sun through the trellis beyond her bedroom window forms a lattice shadow over her torso. She lifts her hand into the light, watches the pattern of the lines moving over her skin. The motion of her wrist is reminiscent of Catherine the Great's upon receiving Marie Antoinette's court painter Louise Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, who later wrote, "The sight of this famous woman so impressed me that I found it impossible to think of anything. I could only stare at her." The tea house woman slides down along the body of her lover, takes his cock into her mouth and sucks, lightly, lips soft as a bee landing on a plum blossom. He is purple, hard, awake. He reaches with both arms and pulls her toward him, onto him. We are chest to chest, and I'm in your ear now, whispering, "You're going to make me come." This is new. The tea house woman's husband had always finished first, even on their wedding night, and he apologized the way men do when they come too soon, and she hugged him and felt almost like herself, comforting him, until it got to the point where, listening to him snore, she would roll over and swear at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that next time would be better. Inevitably, during those early hours and before the rest of the kitchen staff arrived, she found herself downstairs with Nell, letting the older woman console her over a pot of coffee and a plate of hot cinnamon rolls. Imagine the kitchen of a spreading old house in a country town. A great black stove is its main feature, but there's also a big round table and a fireplace with 2 rocking chairs placed in front of it. "Well," Nell would say, retrieving the previous night's chocolate trees from the walk-in and placing them on the tops of freshly frosted coconut-dusted cupcakes, "have you experimented with this? Or while cutting biscuits out of trifle dough, maybe you could wear that." Eventually, after her suggestion of open and transparent communication backfired, when her young friend, after many weeks, finally mustered her courage to ask her husband if there was anything she should be doing differently in bed, and he, in response, put a hand on her head and told her to stop overthinking it. Yes, finally, even then, even Nell threw her hands into the air where they left little puffs of flour like clouds and said, "Men, what can you do? Tell me what I can do for you," you say, your hands clamped around my hips and rocking them forward and back against yours, my hair falling long down the sides of my face, nearly onto your face, your eyes watching mine for instructions, signs, and I don't know what I want or how to ask for it until you stop, let go. Stunned, waiting, "Don't stop," I say, and you flip me over, still inside me, onto my back, yes, like that, as I push back against you, pulling you closer, yes, pushing back under your weight and forward, yes, until you fall heavy on top of me, your eyes finally closing when we are, no, they are, again chest to chest. And as her young lover rests his left temple in the cradle of her right shoulder and jaw, the tea house woman stares up at the ceiling, caressing his neck and back, thinking it's only fair for a woman to come more. Think of all the times they didn't care. Thank you.
No, Molly, thank you. Our third speaker is Marie Howe. Marie Howe is the author of 4 volumes of poetry: Magdalene Poems, The Kingdom of Ordinary Time, The Good Thief, and What the Living Do. And she is co-editor of a book of essays, In the Company of My Solitude, American Writing from AIDS Pandemic. Her poems have appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, Poetry, Agni, Plowshares, Harvard Review, and The Partisan Review, among others. She has been a fellow at the Bunting Institute at Radcliffe College and a recipient of NEA and Guggenheim fellowships. And Stanley Kunitz selected Howe for a Louvain Younger Poets Prize from the American Academy of Poets. In 2015, she received the Academy of American Poetry Fellowship, which recognizes distinguished poetic achievement. From 2012 to 2014, she served as the Poet Laureate of New York State. Welcome to the screen, Marie Howe.
Oh.
Marie, you've got two sources on. You've got it both on you've either got it on a phone and a computer or two computers. And you need to turn off one of them because the sound is feeding back.
Okay, now I can't see you. How's that?
I can see you and it looks great. How about you? You okay?
Yes, thank you. Oh, that was a terrible sound. Molly, I can hardly breathe after that. And Tyehimba, what can I say to you? The two of you are amazing. I'm really. It's hard to breathe. It's too bad that you can't hear us as you're reading, because I think a lot of us are making a lot of noise. I'm just going to pull up my page here. So it's Valentine's Day. And I was thinking about, of course, Valentine's and love and connection between us all. So I'd like to read a poem called The Singularity. For the last several years, I've been reading a lot of physics and trying to understand what the physics folks understand about the nature of reality. And, I've been thinking about the Big Bang. And the idea that we actually everything that is, came from one explosion of extremely dense matter. So here's a poem referring to that dense piece of matter called The Singularity, and it's after reading a lot of Stephen Hawking. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were? So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Remember, there was no nature, no them, no test to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reef feels pain. Trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean. And before that, to when sky was earth and animal was energy and rock was liquid and stars were space and space was not at all, nothing. Before we came to believe humans were so important. Before this awful loneliness. And molecules, we call it, what once was, before anything happened. No I, no we, no one, no was, no verb, no noun, only a tiny, tiny dot brimming with is. All, everything, home. For the last, decade now, I've been mostly teaching eco-poetry. I should say teaching, but I really mean learning with my students and trying to move off, trying to move from the center of the poem and letting the rest of the world come in. So we learn about different animals, we learn about the different elements, we try to fall all over the world and of course grieve what's happening to our planet now because of our presence in it. So during the pandemic, as we all know, things got really quiet. And I was in New York City, and it was extraordinary. Those of you who were there, or any place, it was so quiet, that hum, that that machine that lives under the sidewalks of New York ceased. And we heard bird song in the morning, bird song and sirens, taking people to hospitals. So throughout the pandemic, this voice kept coming to me, and it's what the silence said. Do you still believe in borders now? Birds soar over your maps and walls, and always have. You might have watched how the smoke from your own fires traveled on wind you couldn't see, wafting over the valley and up and over the hills and over the next valley and the next hill. Did you not hear the animals howl and sing? Or hear the silence of the animals no longer singing? Now you know what it is to be afraid. You think this is a dream? It is not a dream. You think this is a theoretical question? What do you love more than what you imagine is your singular life? The water grows clearer, the swans settle and float there. Are you willing to take your place in the forest again? To become loam and bark? To be a leaf falling from a great height? To be the worm who eats the leaf and the bird who eats the worm? Look at the sky. Are you willing to be the sky again? You think this lesson is too hard for you. You want the timeout to end. You want to go to the movies as before, to sit and eat with your friends. It can end now, but not in the way you imagine. You know, the mind that has been talking to you for so long, the mind that can explain everything. Don't listen. You were once a citizen of a country called I don't know. Remember the burning boat that brought you there? Climb in. It seems to me that so much of what we're learning about the rest of the living world is that it's so deeply interconnected. And that's, of course, something us humans have forgotten for so long. And we are deeply interconnected. I want to read two more poems, very short. One is a sort of a new poem. It's actually an old-fashioned lyric, short. It's remembering what it was to write and send and receive letters. So it's called Letter, The Letter, 1968. It's a love letter for Valentine's Day. That he wrote it with his hand and folded the paper and slipped it into the envelope and sealed it with his tongue and pressed it closed so I might open it with my fingers. That he brought it to the box and slipped it through the slot so that it might be carried through time and weather to where I waited on the front porch step. We knew how to wait then. It was what life was, much of it. So when the mailman came up the walk and didn't have it, he might have it the next day or the next, when it bore the mark of his hand who had written my name, so I might open it and read again, and then again, and look at the envelope he'd sealed and press my mouth to where his mouth had been. And I'm just going to end with a very brief, gorgeous love poem by Emily Dickinson. I thought it was right here. Where did it go, Emily? Because as we know, she loved very passionately wild nights, Wild nights, were I with thee. Wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a heart in port, done with the compass, done with the chart. Rowing in Eden, the sea, might I but moor tonight in thee. Thank you very much.
Wow, y'all are amazing. That was truly uplifting and going in so many different directions. It's a real privilege to be reading here with y'all tonight, Marie and Molly. Very fascinating. I have my students here in the class in the uh, in the audience, so I'm glad that they were able to witness all of this.
Such different voices, I mean, Tyehimba, you know how I feel about you and your work. You resuscitate, you bring people to life. You bring them to life, and they walk and sing and swear and speak and yearn and suffer in front of us, with us, and it's just thank you. You educate us. It's so beautiful. And Molly, you give voice to female desire. God bless you. God bless you. I mean, gorgeous, beautiful,
Right.
beautiful, brave, radical, marvelous, ordinary, desire, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. This is what an just an honor for me to be here tonight with you too.
Mm.
Well, Marie, I said I gotta write me some more letters now.
You could probably go to CVS and get some like 50% off now, like those little.
Yeah. It made me think of. I mean, it made me think about technology and the way we experience intimacy,
Yeah.
and the way because the letter writing became such an intimate affair, you forget about that level of dedication to getting the paper and having stamps. Okay, and sealing, etc. It became such an intimate and erotic kind of exchange. I really appreciated that. And Molly, with your work, I was thinking about that kind of interpolation of cultures there that you were bringing into a conversation about eroticism and about intimacy and about and and the kind of confluence that you were bringing into the work across cultures and through literature is just really very interesting. I love that kind of mixing that makes us rethink the literature and the stories that we have heard in our lives.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. I was thinking as you were talking to him about how physical letter writing is and was, and how everybody wrote letters. How Virginia Woolf would get the morning mail and the afternoon mail, and you could write somebody something and they get it the same day. And how Emily Dickinson wrote so many letters to Sue, her love, her next door neighbor who married her brother, and who very possibly, could have been Emily's true love since when they were girls. And the first letter, you might probably know this, but she sent over to Sue. It was folded, and on the very top of it, it said, "Open me carefully."
Oof, okay. All right. Yeah.
Isn't that just gorgeous? Open me carefully.
Very, very amazing. I love how you have to go back into these texts and and re and deconstruct and reconstruct these texts in such
Mm-hmm.
a fascinating way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I was also interested, Molly, in your process of the word bank
Yeah.
and creating the word bank and going into it and then shuffling it up and and that's probably going to be an assignment. I'm telling my class, build this word bank and then go in and it prompts you to come up with a new kind of understanding that pushes you in a different direction.
Yeah. Talk about that, Molly.
Please.
Doing.
Yeah. Um, for my first book, I scrambled up verbs and nouns from Tender Buttons, which is that's the one I would recommend as the source for students. It's just filled with amazing verbs and nouns, so many good nouns. And then I scrambled up John Ratty's A Remembered Darkness for my next book, and it is very true that the sort of the spirit of those texts have very much filtered their way into my books. I credit that to the source material, but I give word lists to students, and what I like about the process for myself, but then also what I can see happening is that you give the same words to 20 different people. It brings out the sort of the deepest soul of them individually, but it's the same starting place.
Mhm.
And I think it helps helps you tap into something that maybe you couldn't consciously try to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I took a poetry workshop last summer as a student because I just was stuck. I was doing a lot of revising, and John Murillo was offering a class through the work center, Tim. And so I signed up for it. I worked something out with Kelly, and it was a blast because a lot of what John did was that kind of thing, Molly. I mean, it was all about, messing with your patterns and upending them and it was so deeply refreshing to me as a writer. First, to be a student in a class, which I want to be now. I want to be in your class, Molly. I want to be in your class, Tyehimba. I do. I really want to be in it and do what you tell me to do. And you give me a word back. Like there's something about that constraint and freedom of that sort of necessity that the word bank provides that is liberating.
That's really interesting. I mean, for those people may not know it, but I was in Marie Howe's class. She was one of my MFA instructors back what was it, 2003 or whatever? I can't remember.
Yeah, my little girl was really little. Yeah.
Yes, yes, she was.
I think I just
very
went to
little.
China to get her.
That's true. That's true.
I was so tired, I could hardly walk. Yeah.
But I think one thing I learned from your class was one word that sticks out to me is compassion, because I remember a deep listening that you had in your class, and there were a few incidents in that class. I remember there was one student that had one poem where they worked on over and over and over and over and over again in workshop, which is actually very unusual. And and then at the end, Marie, you had the patience to work with that student, and because very, very difficult emotional terrain for her to to traverse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be an interesting experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a privilege, isn't it, to be with our sisters and brothers who are trying to create something that has never happened before. And you were writing the poems of your first book. I mean, you were already a king. You were like.
I was just struggling from one session to the next.
Yeah, but you were doing it, boy. You were really doing it. You were hitting it out of the park. Every week you bring in every dog. Go, okay, well, there it is. It's done. It's ridiculous. You had a vision, You had a vision. It's rare.
Yeah, I was coming straight from slam, so I had
Yeah.
had real real kind of hit it hard kind of attitude at the time. Yeah.
But that's a beautiful thing. And what I wonder is, I wish, like, I often ask my students, I said, let's just get up and let's just say some lines, throw them to the next person. The next person has to take them and do something. Let's just do it. We get so stuck to the page, just do it. Just pass it on, we could learn a lot if we mixed it up together. So-called slam, so-called performance, so-called page poets. And Molly, your reading was a performance.
Yes.
I mean, it was breathtaking.
Yes.
Literally. I know. It was.
Thank you.
But I mean, it was the way you read it, it was like, oh my God.
Another thing that Molly's reading made me think about was translation.
Mm-hmm.
And because you talked about how people, how one person translated a word like this and the other one translated like that. And I wonder if you could talk about that tell us about your experience with that.
I don't know if I can. I'm Sappho presents I mean, really that puzzle comes back to, I mean, how many different translations of those poems have you read by now, right? And then when Anne Carson's came out, it was just like, well, who are these people that have been making up these poems? So that's really where that interest started with me, is when you see that Carson translation. It's kind of shocking how many liberties have been taken. But yeah, that was really it. But as you all were reading and talking, I ask a lot of poets this question, and I tried to theorize if I could answer on my own, but I can't. So for both of you, do you write one line at a time and then finish that line and then move down to the next line, or write the poem and then move your lines?
Oh, you mean, do we write line by line? Do we write in poetic line, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That good question. I write very messy and by hand, down the page, line by line. But then usually what happens is, in revision, one section will end up being at the top, and another one will end up being down at the bottom, or something along those lines. Yeah. And then line breaks is a whole different thing about where's the best place for the line break, where am I trying to get the best idea out of one line and bring it into the next one.
Yeah. I actually wanted to see your page because I don't know what your writing looks like, Molly. Is it in lines, or is it fluid, like prose lines?
I put the link in the chat, and on the website, just because of the internet, it looks like prose blocks, but actually it's in long line tercets.
Yeah. For me, it's something between the line and the sentence, the rhythm of the sentences, and but it often does come out in lines that might shuffle a little differently, but generally, when something isn't working, it doesn't have a sense of a line yet, or a sense of internal rhythm. It's just ideas, or it's just mental. It doesn't have the physicality yet, the lines of the physicality.
Right.
And when they start just happening, that's the best feeling in the world. It's like listening to a music that's coming from somewhere.
There you go.
Right. So great. You might be far away, but you can hear it dimly.
So do we have any questions from the chat, so to speak? I don't know.
I can't even see it. I can't see the chat anymore.
I can't.
I can help you with that.
Well, thank you.
The first question from our viewers is, Molly, do you always only take nouns and verbs for your bank? Molly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nouns primarily. I've been cutting out verbs even more. The nouns are the best. They really are, and then you have to figure out what you have to do with them. So I think that the nouns are the most productive. I think over the last 20 years of doing this, I think nouns are the way to go. Yeah.
Got it. The second question is, Professor Jess, could you talk about the work and feeling that went into your poem, Freedom?
Well, that's a poem from somebody written from the perspective of Leadbelly, who at the time was incarcerated. So, it's a persona poem. All both books are all persona, more or less, and it involves, well, from my process is doing a lot of research about the people that I'm writing about. Number one, that means reading everything I can about them, but also about the time in which they lived, the context in which they lived, in order to get an understanding of the ways they might have felt. And in that case, it means after getting all that information together, it means really keeping sight of the fact that I am entering into that voice, and there's part of me inside the voice, in order to bring it into fruition. So in other words, that meant thinking about, what does it mean to lose one's freedom? What does it mean, to think about the ways that freedom or incarceration, entraps somebody and limits their potential, and how does one understand that? And I would also say in the context of the African American experience, you're talking about the construction of a prison industrial complex that was in many ways fashioned to keep Black folks in a state of incarceration after the Civil War and after chattel slavery. So a lot of those things go into the understanding of that particular poem.
Thank you. I have a question for you. What emerging writer would this is not homework, so you don't have to answer this, but what emerging author that you know of that you think we ought to know about, can you reveal to us? Who do you suggest we discover?
I can make a suggestion. This person's a former student of mine long ago here at Sarah Lawrence. Her name is Jessie Normile. And she wrote this really amazing book called Great Exodus, Great Wall, Great Party. I mean, Great Exodus, Great Wall, Great Party. Jessie Normile, Normile.
M-I-L-E. Okay.
Normile. And she went to Sarah Lawrence. She went to the Michener Center in Austin for 3 years, and now she's back in New York. And this book just came out. I don't know, never remember time anymore, but I think it was probably last year.
Okay.
Really recently, and it's really exciting, really fresh.
I am taking notes.
And I would recommend. I just read with this poet down in Oklahoma. He's a Louisiana poet, but Clements Hurd. This is called Tragic City. So you can kind of see that he's getting his vibe from Youssef there in certain ways. But Clements Hurd, really, really interesting book. This won the 2020 Aninga Robert Dana Prize for Poetry, elected by Major Jackson. Really, really, intensely felt, very humane, very, very much, involved in the kind of music of the place that he's from. He's from the South, and he's very, very, very interesting work there.
Thank you. H-E-R-D?
H-E-A, yes, H-E-A-R-D.
H-E-A-R-D. Okay.
Yes.
I would recommend a book called Orange by E. Briskin. E is, E period, Briskin. The book, you begin at the top of page 1, and then you go to the top of page 2, and you make your way to the end of the book, and then you read it backwards.
What?
And then you zig
Oh,
through
Okay.
the book. But it's, it could be poetry, could be nonfiction, could be memoir, could be fiction. So a lot of genre, mystery. But I think what's most impressive to me is how much play there is in a book that is about grief. And the grief is named, but it's also unnamed. And the grief is like capital G grief. So it's about a dog, but it might also not at all be about a dog. So
I've made notes of all of them. Thank you. Now I want to know what each of you is reading. What are you reading?
Wow.
Just
I will
anything.
say, here's a book I think was fantastic. This is Maida Vang. She wrote this book, Yellow
Oh,
Rain. It's about the poisoning of the environment during the Vietnam War
Oh,
in Vietnam. So it's very docu-poetic. It's
what's her name? Tyehimba?
MAI. Next title is DER, and last name is Vang, VANG. Yeah. Yellow Rain. Very very intense piece of work there. So yeah.
Yeah.
ladies, what are you reading these days?
I'm reading Sequoia Nagamatsu's How High We Go in the Dark.
I highly recommend it also.
How high we go? How
How
high?
High We Go in the Dark.
How High We Go in the Dark. It's really like it's a cross between Station 11 and Cloud Atlas.
Okay.
Ish. More. We'll talk.
I've been reading Meister Eckhart. I mean, his sermons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's the guy for me. Meister Eckhart. He sees into the fabric of reality. He really gets it. So I've been reading his sermons again, which I do constantly, because he's just so direct and he's so funny. In fact, Molly, I was thinking with your new dog, there's a moment in one of her sermons, I don't even remember the context. He said, if you're afraid and you have to go somewhere, bring a child. And if you can't find a child, bring a dog. I brought a child and a dog with me wherever I went for about 20 years, but I was very afraid. But I also just read, my friend Donna Massini loaned me by Sigrid Nunez, What Are You Going Through? She has that wonderful book called The Friend, which has a dog in it too. But it's a very sad, beautiful book. What are you going through? And she uses the quote from Simone Weil, the French philosopher, theologian, writer, who says that really all we are asked to ask of each other is, what are you going through? What are you going through? And to give each other that kind of attention. So she does that in this book. It's fiction, in the way it is, transparent sort of fiction. But you sense that she's asking different people, she's attending to different people in her life and asking them, what are you going through? And she's listening, which I think is, I just saw Dave Assay, the guy who started StoryCorps, in New York, about StoryCorps. And they're doing a new thing, which is getting people with very different political backgrounds to talk with each other, not about politics. And it seems that if we could just not talk politics, if we just put everything on hold for a year, nothing could happen. Nothing could happen except money going to people who need money instead of the people who have it. But we just said to each other, what are you going through? It was so interesting, wasn't it? even people we think of as so different from us politically.
On that note, we are out of time. And I can't tell you how touching and enriching this evening has been for me. It really is exactly what I'm sure Roger has in mind for Write America, of just different artists getting together and having these kinds of discussions. So I do thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here this evening. I am going to sign you off. Sorry. And I thank you to Tyehimba, Molly, and Marie for participating in Write America this evening, and to every one of you who tuned in tonight. And thank you to Roger Rosenblatt for creating this original and important series to look forward to each Monday evening. Tonight's episode is the perfect example of the mission of Write America. We hope to see you all next Monday at 7 as we welcome Arthur C., Z., Alice McDermott, and Henry Louis Gates. Please remember to check out the Birds Books Write America page where you can sign up for any upcoming episode or rewatch this one. Thank you again for coming tonight.